And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are. Sorry we had to play that music a few times over there. We had a little audio problem, but I believe we are all set and ready to go for your biblical, theological, and worldview questions on this Wednesday. We're coming back tonight for the Gospel of Mark. Been off a couple of weeks. Gospel of Mark will be back on tonight. Looking forward to that. What are we in? Mark 13, perhaps? And always a delight to see you there for Bible study. Tomorrow night, hey, Alex in London, we are going with the Gospel of the Kingdom versus the Gospel of Grace. That's the topic, Thursday night Bible study. Are they the same thing? Are they different things? We'll look at the evidence and bring that about before we begin a new series, having finished Colossians. By the way, I've got the book out on Colossians now, although it's not on the website, so I guess that doesn't really matter. You build a better mousetrap, you have to put it for sale. So good to see all of you. If you have a question, put the word question in front, those of you who are watching live, or you can go to askthetheologian.com, where you will be able to ask your question at any time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm looking here. Oh, here we go. I knew there was a question. Our friend Ken in Dallas did not put the word question in front, so it didn't come up. But Myra said, good question. And therefore it popped up. I was looking for it. So I found you, Ken. I'm going to go ahead and take it before I forget it's there. And so Ken said, your well-versed Okie protege gave a very good analysis of last night's debate. What are your thoughts? Here are my thoughts. I didn't watch it. I had other things to do. And I really kind of thought, I can get the highlights and watch them later. But here's my overall. It was on in the other room for about 20 minutes. So I heard 20 minutes. I never set my eyes on it. I don't have any idea what it looked like. So this is not going to be a good analysis. But it will be an analysis of the whole system. I think these debates, they're not policy, they're not substantive, and that's unfortunate, they're all about one-liners, who can give the best zinger, and the pundits then have to have something to talk about afterwards, because we've created this system in which we'll all rush to the news to see what the talking heads have to say about it. And they have to say something about it, so, they're going to come up with, he had his eyebrow up a little too high on his right side, and therefore is probably not fit for the presidency. They got to come up with something. I suspect if you, and maybe this is what I should do, if you read the transcript of the debate, you would find that it was utterly and absolutely worthless in terms of helping Americans who care about policy to make a decision on their candidate. So I'm not sure there's even a place for a debate anymore. I honestly, you could scrap the entire debate system. The only reason it won't be scrapped is because it gets good views. A lot of people will watch it, and so the candidates, they want to do it because they like people to look at them. You know that politicians will never be baptized by immersion. Did you know this? Politicians will never be baptized by immersion because they don't want to be out of the public eye that long. I mean, do you give a politician a second? They gotta be out there in front of the cameras. So the politicians are going to do it. The news media, that's who runs this thing now. They need the viewership. They need something to talk about on a Tuesday night, so they're not going to do away with it. So, unless Americans just say, those things are stupid, they're rigged, they're unbalanced, they're not substantive, it's yakety, 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 yak, 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 he said, she said, literally, in this case. So I'm not sure that it's of much value, honestly. That's my take there. Chandler, excuse me, my friend on the excavator, says, and I would have been shocked at once too. Chandler says, I'm shocked at your civic nonchalantness. There was a time when I would have pushed everything aside and watched the debates, watched the conventions. I was really a political junkie at one point in my life. And I'm still pretty highly into politics, and I would say pretty highly aware of various positions and what's going on. I just think the debates themselves are an opportunity for each side to give its 90-second advertisement on something, followed by the other side giving their 90-second advertisement. I'd be much more open to a legit town hall meeting, something like this. If you go back to watch any of the old debates, they really were substantive. You probably have to go back to the 80s for that, but and prior to that. There's a series, I've watched one or two of them on YouTube, put out by the Nixon Foundation, I think, on YouTube, a series of town hall meetings that Nixon did. I don't remember if it was 68 or 72. And he went around the country and he had these town hall. Now, I'm sure, I say I'm sure, I suspect they only let certain people in the audience, but the audience was, a couple hundred people. And people raised their hands and said, okay, here you go. It at least looked like, and I assume probably was, that these were just random questions from random citizens. And Nixon would give a very detailed policy view of that particular issue. Now that's helpful. The debates go back to 1960 is when they the first televised debate anyway. Obviously there were some debates prior to that, but Lincoln Douglas type debates out in the open. But this thing, I don't know. It just seems rigged. It's no surprise that ABC and what's his name, David Muir or Moore or whatever, I don't know how you say it, and whoever the lady was, I can't remember. It's no surprise that they're going to bat for Kamala, and even in the short deal that I heard, they were, oh wait, Mr. Trump, no, Kamala. She just told a lie. We could find 100 videos that contradict what she just said, but mum's the word. So it's a sham. That's my view on the debates. It's a sham. How's that? And those of you, I doubt there's anyone, but those of you who are trying to make your decision, base it on other matters. Don't get your policy information from those debates, because it's just not there on either candidate, for that matter. Next question of the day. Question: how did God? Oh, excuse me. I put a how and it's not there. The anonymous question says, hello, did God choose all Israel or not? This is actually a grammar question. And the answer is, but follow me all the way through. The answer is, yes, he chose all Israel. But that is different than he chose every Israeli. Let me give an example. John chapter 6, all that he has given me, I will lose none of it. Uses the neuter pronoun, it. It's talking about a nation. All that God's given me, I will lose none of it. I will raise it up on the last day. But then, in other places, perhaps it'll come to me where this is, but you'll know the passage. In other places, Jesus says in the Gospels, I am going to take away the kingdom. I'm paraphrasing with a mild bit of interpretation, but not much. I'm going to take away the kingdom and I'm going to give it to another people. Now, the nation, Israel, is chosen, but that generation was not chosen. They did not get it. It was taken away, given to another. Now, given to another what? Another group of people who are Israel, the nation at another time. So, all Israel shall be saved, but will every Israeli throughout time be saved? Obviously, Israeli is a modern term, so would you say, is every Jew saved? No, they're not. On the individual level, the individual Jew, let's say under the age of the law, the individual Jew had to determine, am I going to obey the law or am I not going to obey the law? Am I going to live under the standards of the covenant or am I going to ignore the standards of the covenant? What is it that I'm going to do on it? And so you could take in the day of Moses, the nation chosen to be God's people, chosen to be God's peculiar people. But Moses and then Joshua later says, choose ye this day. That was the words of Joshua. Choose ye this day whom ye will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So there's an individual responsibility that must be given, an individual choice. But whether, let's take a person like Korah in Moses' day, if Korah and a bunch of people decide to rebel against God, do their own thing, the nation is still chosen. If in the first century the nation rejects the Messiah and therefore doesn't get its kingdom, Israel's still going to get its kingdom. Israel will be raised up at the last day. So I think that the answer is yes, but it's grammatical. So the way we use grammar today, I think, and perhaps this is a little sloppy, not persnickety in our use of grammar, but the way we use grammar. See, I've got my little page magnifiers laying there, blocking the camera. Yeah, I should clean that up a little, shouldn't I? Later. But the way we use grammar today, when you say God chose all Israel, we interpret that as God chose every Jew. And I think that is what is not true and what has to be changed there. Thanks for that anonymous question about the selection of Israel. This question relates to something I said yesterday, also does not have a name to it. How did Adam live 930 years without the tree of life? Now, we were talking about the age of the earth yesterday. And I think I might have said 939 years, and I think I was mixing that up with Methuselah's 969 years. I think 930 is the right number. But we were talking about some of the assumptions on the age of the earth and where you begin that count. And so you could say, well, you know, he lived 800 of those years with the tree of life. And then he was separated and lived 130 years. Which by itself might be a decent assumption. The problem is you do get to those like Methuselah, even Abraham at 175, who clearly never had the tree of life. So I want to switch your question just a little bit, though it's still going to answer the question. You ask, how did Adam live 930 years without the tree of life? I'm going to say, how did Methuselah live 969 years without the tree of life? So Adam had advantage of the tree of life for some period of his life. Methuselah never did. Methuselah was not born in the garden. He was born outside of the garden. And so he's got 969 years without the tree of life. How did this happen? I think two things. One, let's just put it up to that. Who verbalized the second law of thermodynamics? Was that like Newton or something like that? I'm not sure. But the second law of thermodynamics basically says everything's falling apart. Given enough time, it'll fall apart. I think there's some truth there with DNA. I think that DNA replicates itself, and yet there is the possibility that the DNA can pick up a little bit different code along the way. Some of you know that I do use artificial intelligence, AI. And I think it's actually a very good tool. Not something to be scared of, something to learn to use and make it have advantage in your life. But here's the issue with artificial intelligence. You start basically, let's call it a conversation. Start a conversation. And if you don't give it any instruction at all, phew, it's Katie, bar the door. So let's say you rein in. Say, no, wait, I'm the boss, applesauce. This is what you're supposed to do. And it's very obedient. So, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And it begins to perform beautifully, just beautifully. I'll do that, just exactly like you want. You let that conversation go a while, and it quits working. And you remind it, hey, no, you're supposed to do this. Oh, yeah, I'll do that. And then it does the wrong thing. And you get to a point in the conversation where it will not at all do what you want it. Now, here's the issue. It's going on a copy of 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 the conversation. And it doesn't have the ability to completely wipe that out and get back to the original instruction. I think there's some of that in DNA. It's amazing that 6,000 years of DNA that, you know, the code still works. God did make it somewhat able to reject a lot of that. Bad conversation, bad coding. But it gets in there. And once it gets in there, it becomes part of the code. That's not evolution. That's I guess you could call it. The DNA code evolves, but not in the sense of Darwinian evolution. So there's one issue, is just the second law of thermodynamics. We're not as good as we used to be. I think, I can't prove this, I don't think anyone could. I think this might be one of the reasons that not only did ancient people live longer, but they seem to have phenomenal abilities. We haven't kept all that, and the bad education in our world, John Nelson Darby Academy, JNDarbyacademy.org. will resolve that. But the bad education in this world has caused us to think ancients were nearly baboon. They could barely do anything. It's not accurate at all. You look at some of the ancient things, even Stonehenge, we can't figure it out. The pyramids, how in the world did they do that? You even go to 2,000 years ago and the wall, the retaining wall around what's often called Herod's Temple. We have no idea how they got those big rocks. Not only, quarried and then, shaped. There's probably good words for this. Quarried and shaped, but then placed perfectly. I think we've gone downhill. Now add to that, too, you had the flood. And the flood does seem that it changed the environment. There was a firmament above, the waters below. It appears that the waters above let loose, the waters below flooded forth. That changes barometric pressure. Barometric pressure changes a lot of things in this world. You know, if you got a wound you need healed, one of the things you can do is go to a hyperbaric chamber. That is, it's got a higher degree of oxygen in it. So you just take that away. Okay, that changes things. So I think scientifically, those people, they had a better DNA and a better environment. That's what I think. And therefore they were able to handle 939 years. And often, I should throw this in, the passage in Genesis chapter 6, I'll give 120 years, so I'll not strive with man, my spirit will not strive with man forever, for he's flesh, 120 years. There's a couple of different ways to interpret that, but the wrong way to interpret that is, I'm not going to let man live longer than 120 years. That has no credibility. A couple other credible options on it, but that one has no credibility. The way I take it is 120 years from now, there's going to be the flood. I'm done with this. You've got 120 years to build that ark and be ready to go. Manny in San Antonio, thank you. Good to see you. Thanks for the welcome back. And Manny says, let me pull up my scripture here. Often with Manny, I have to have two screens open, two panels, because Manny does comparison questions. Is Paul saying that the soul is immortal in 2 Corinthians 5:8? Doesn't 1 Timothy 6:16 say the opposite? Or is this talking about two different things? So let's put these passages up. We've got 2 Corinthians 5:8 on the left. We are confident, I say, willing rather to be absent from the body, to be present with the Lord. Now, as Manny in San Antonio says, this implies an immortality of the soul. Doesn't explicitly say that, but if there's some kind of absence from the body, then there's the ability to live on without the body. Now, again, lots of debate there, and that's we'll address this in our Why series on why some people believe in soul sleep. But certainly from this passage alone, a great implication is, yeah, that seems to talk about an immortal soul. You could also, now let's leave it there. I don't want to muddy the waters. Now, does that go against what Paul says in 1 Timothy 6:16? I've talked about this before. I've got some highlighting. I just don't remember what it has to do with. Who only, speaking of God, who only hath immortality, dwelling in light which no man can approach, unto whom no man hath seen, nor can see, to whom be honor and glory. Okay, so this portion right here, especially, let me see if I can put that all in blue. There we go. Let's look at the blue portion. And here, I'll make this blue too so that we can match the colors. This appears to talk about immortality. This says only God hath, right now, immortality. Now, I don't think he's necessarily talking about two different things. I think that this does, at least on the surface, and I don't see anything that would cause me to think through this, it does seem to say, hey, there's an immortality of the soul, and it does say God is the only one with immortality. Now, can we take the 1 Timothy passage and say this, God alone has immortality, negates our interpretation of 2 Corinthians 5:8. We cannot interpret 2 Corinthians 5:8 as immortality because God only has immortality. There, I do think you would be making an application of 1 Timothy 6 that would be incorrect. Though it's not horrible thinking. And if you're really digging into it, ought to dig. Does 1 Timothy 6:16 negate any possibility of immortality in 2 Corinthians 5:8? Now, let me open up a third window and go to 2 Corinthians 1 Corinthians 15, beginning in verse 50. Flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom. This is talking about Israel. No way they can inherit the kingdom because they are flesh and blood. It is interesting that he does specify here flesh and blood. Let me go ahead and put that in blue. Is here whereas absent from the body, this is flesh and blood. Absent from flesh and blood. Can we do that with 2 Corinthians 5:8? I think we can. Rather to be willing to be absent from flesh and blood. Flesh and blood does not have immortality, but can the soul have immortality, or does 1 Corinthians 6 negate it? Flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed in the moment, twinkling. There we go. Let's go down to verse 53. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, this mortal must put on immortality. Now here, hath, right here in the present, has immortality. The flesh and blood does not have immortality, but is going to have immortality. So I think flesh and blood part, we can say, okay, I get that. Flesh and blood doesn't have immortality. God alone is mortal. But God doesn't have flesh and blood, so this can't be talking about God's flesh and blood. So what do you do here? You could say, oh no, this is only about the body. But it can't only be about the body because it's absent from the body. What is it that's absent from the body and present with the Lord? You got to put something in there. Now, can you take the word immortality? Again, I'm putting forth more of a hypothesis than a proof here. Can you take immortality and say God has existed for all eternity? I haven't. My soul had a beginning point. God alone hath immortality, dwelling in light. That's not me. One thing you can do with it is to say, look, it's using the same word. I'm going to assume it's using the same word in Greek as well. It's using the same word, but for God, this goes beyond, because he's always existed. I haven't existed. There's another issue here, and here you would argue on the comma. Let me go ahead and put the comma in yellow there. You argue on the comma. Obviously, we put in the commas. But does that go together as one? Who hath immortality dwelling in light. Is this saying God alone has immortality dwelling in light? Manny's got an immortal soul, but it's not dwelling in light. Now, I suspect, we won't dig into the Greek here on this, but I suspect that is a viable interpretation. God alone, he's the only one with immortality dwelling in light. Even at that, you would have to have a discussion about, well, what about the angelic beings? Let's go ahead and call him Lucifer. Lucifer is a created being, but Lucifer is never going to cease to exist. He's going into the lake of fire, tormented day and night, forever and ever. But Lucifer doesn't have immortality dwelling in light. Lucifer has immortality dwelling in the abyss. So I think on its simplest level, to get down to this, Manny always has the tough questions. On its simplest level, you might take 1 Timothy 6:16 to negate any kind of immortal view of the soul that you might interpret from 2 Corinthians 5:8. And it's not bad logic. The question is, are you making the conclusion too quickly? There's more evidence to bring in there. That's what I would argue is, yeah, you can make the argument, but when all is said and done, at the end of the day, bringing all the evidence out there, I think you're going to have a hard time really supporting the argument. So it's one piece that sort of initially says, yeah, there it is, let's go. But then you bring all these other things into it. And this is something that I think we ought to become, and I think probably our audience is, our regular audience, I think we ought to become more comfortable with, now we see through a glass darkly. We ought to be more comfortable with, I'm not sure we're ever going to totally figure this out. I'm going to keep trying. I find too many evangelicals especially, I'll make a political example here in a moment, but I find too many evangelicals who get really uncomfortable when you start questioning some basic assumption that they had. Why? Question the assumptions. Go ahead and test this. We believe that the Bible is accurate. We believe that, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God, how inscrutable are his judgments, how unsearchable are his ways. And yet, we insist that the answer be, I'll say, simplistic, reductionistic. I think we ought to have a bigger brain and say, okay, so I'd like to go with this simplistic answer, but honestly, if it comes down to it, that one's not going to work. Ultimately, my political example, I'm not sure now that I jumped on that horse. I'm not sure I want to take the train, but horse, train. There's a lot of politicians everywhere, not politicians, a lot of citizens everywhere that vote the way they vote because they've always voted that way. We like our politics to be simple. I'll even hit a golden calf of the political world. We don't like a politician to ever change their mind. If they change their mind, we say, oh, they flip-flop. They just flip-flop. Truth is, people do change their mind. I change my mind, you change your mind. But even there's something inbred in us that says, no, we don't like to change our mind. Here's how I'll prove it. You got a 4-year-old? Hey, we're going to the park this evening. Comes this evening, and you've had some crisis happen, and maybe the crisis is one that they can't even comprehend. You know, all of a sudden, the boss called, and the deadline is 8 a.m. tomorrow. I'm sorry. I know I said we were going, but we can't go. But you said, you promised. No, but circumstances are different now. So what I'm saying is, we have a hard time, once we accept a reductionist idea, a simplified idea, we want to stick with it. I'm saying, hey, free yourself from all that. And say, no, I want to make sure I understand it correctly. And I understand it's maybe somewhat unsearchable, that I can't understand all of immortality because I'm mortal. But anyway, that was all discussion there rather than the question. Thanks, Manny. Good question. I appreciate that. Good to see everybody. Let's go with Trent in Wisconsin, who says, now that I have a commute to work instead of 20 steps to the Ask the Theologian studio, I've been listening to talk show radio. I like to stop mid-question and say a few things. Some of you probably listen to talk show radio. I used to listen to Rush back in the day. And now Shelley's car, mine doesn't have it, but Shelley's car has satellite radio. So sometimes, if I'm in her car, I will put on some of the news channels. But I can't take it too long because honestly, I'm tired of hearing ads about Big Glue and he's only on number 2 and you know, and how to get the IRS off your back, and it's one advertisement after another, after another, after another, followed by guys who have to say something, saying something. Says a guy who has to say something. So every now and then I'll have to say, I don't really go to the talk radio programs. I go to, we don't have talk radio in our town because we're too far from radio. If you get it really on a good day, you know, and the wave skips over to you, you can get it. But Trent knows we don't really have. You know, you can't listen to, who's the guy, Dan Bongino. He's on the radio, I guess. And so I used to do some podcasts, listen to those guys, which is better because you don't have the advertisements. Or as many. But I don't know, I get tired of them. And I think maybe it's because 3 hours a day, you got to say something about 2 topics. People say that about me too, I'm sure. But anyway, I'm not a huge talk radio guy. Going on, but as the elections get closer, you start to hear more and more where the funding for the channel is coming from, especially in a swing state like Wisconsin. Yeah, you're exactly right. You know, who's advertising, whatnot. Moving on. So I decided to start listening to audiobooks and podcasts more. Oh, that's where I would have gone. This is where I would say, Trent, quit listening to talk radio. Your life will be full of advertisements. Rather, listen to audiobooks and podcasts. Here comes the question. Where do you get all of your audiobooks from, and what would you recommend, since I like history as well? Trent knows that I listen to a lot of history books. I use audible.com. I started out, and this is a good place to start out, I think. I started out on their lowest level which means you don't get any of the good books. There's this, I don't know, $7.95 a month maybe, and you get these, you get the books nobody wants to buy. I don't know what they call that library, but I started out there. Because honestly, I have found that when you're reading books about James McKinley, they're not bestsellers. But there's some good stuff out there. And you can listen, for a long, long, long time on that. Well, they do get you after a while. And after a while, I was like, I want to read this book by the same author. I liked his book. I want to read another one of his books, but that one takes a credit. So now I'm on the one that gives you 1 credit every other month. I can't remember how much this costs, but 1 credit every other month. So I can get a new book every other month. And if I have been traveling or something, or having a lot of more reading time, then I used to get all those free ones. Right now I got 2 credits built up because I haven't used them. What I would do is pick a subject you like, and I've got some health, I've got a lot of history, presidential history, American history, but even, Queen Isabella and Ferdinand, some ancient Middle East history. I've got a couple of art history kind of things, very, very little on that. But once you find an author, see what else they wrote. That's the way I did. Yeah. Check out those. You still have to have a subscription to get the Plus library, maybe. I don't know what it's called. And once you start buying the credits, they make it hard to find the free ones. You have to I know it's in here somewhere, but they ain't gonna set it up for you, where you just get those free ones. Scott says, I like history videos, sound only, mostly from YouTube. Yeah, there's some good history videos on YouTube. There are. And this individual, did I already say your name? Mentions paying YouTube Premium. Depending on what you need in life, it might be I don't have YouTube Premium. The one reason I would like YouTube Premium is because you can keep it going, because I very rarely watch, and I don't even like to watch, because I can't do 2 things at once if I'm watching. So I want just the sound, but you have to pay for the premium to have that privilege. Says, I'll cancel if Elon ever starts up a video hosting service. I agree. Moving on, Gerard, are you familiar with a book called The Big Spin by C.J. Lovick? I am not. Let me see if I can find anything on it just real quick. He says, we'll send you a PDF. The Big Spin. Here's Prophecy Watchers. Seems to have 16 of his the language of the garden. Oh, look, the May Partnership Package. That's that one right there is published by Dispensational Publishing. How about that? The Sojourner's Adventure Through Pilgrim's Progress. I'm not a Pilgrim's Progress fan, but the Bereshit, Passover Prophecy, the mystery of the end revealed in the beginning. is the Sabbath day millennial prophecy about to unfold. I'm always a little hesitant with titles like that, but it may be very good. The mystery of the scepter of Judah, the mystery of the messianic manna, two Bible mysteries in one. And then probably some things in which he's got magazine articles. So no, I'm not familiar. But here's my, from what I've seen so far, here's my guess. C.J. Lovick is probably intelligent. He's got a good IQ and able to logically put together some arguments. Where we may differ on what we've seen, and I haven't seen, the big spin is not on here. Where we may differ is that he may take, and this is a big might, he might take some Jewish prophecy and apply it more into our lives today than I would. Because I can tell you right now how much Jewish prophecy I would apply to our day. Here's the whole thing. That was it. That's how much Jewish prophecy I would have applied to our day. We're not in a prophetic period. So when I see things like the mystery of the scepter of Judah, the mystery of the messianic manna, two Bible mystery books in one. Now, again, I don't know that he's applying that today, but he might be. Over here, the Bereshit Passover prophecy, the mystery of the end revealed in the beginning, is the Sabbath day millennial prophecy about to unfold. Now, again, he could be putting all of this in the future after the rapture, in which case maybe I would agree with him. Or he could be putting it into today, in which I would disagree with the premise. And when you disagree with the premise, you can't really answer the question. But yeah, I'd be interested taking a look at that particular book. You can send it my way. Gerard, thank you. Let's go to Mr. or Mrs. Chartier. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but it does look sophisticated anyway, and with the KJV moniker after that. So I don't know. Perhaps coming from it doesn't sound like Kalamazoo, Mr. Chartier in Kalamazoo. Wherever you are, I'd love to hear. But let's go ahead and take your question if you want to put where you are, and if I pronounced it right. Or if that's even your name, because some people don't have their names, on the YouTube. But hey, Douglas, good to see you too. There's a new name I just happened to run across. Where are you from, Douglas? I'm looking for someone from Kalamazoo. Okay, Mr. or Mrs. Chartier, where in the Bible does it say that the rapture is pre-tribulational? Book, chapter, and verse, please. Nowhere. I'll be the one honest guy, one honest pre-tribber out there. It doesn't say that, nor do you need it to hold the position. It's a fallacy to say I have to have book, chapter, and verse or I won't hold it. There is a lot of theology. I would venture even to say maybe most of your theology does not have book, chapter, and verse support. So here's what you've got. You've got two kinds of, I want to use the word doctrine, but I don't want to use the word doctrine. Two kinds of beliefs. One is textual revelation. Now, for you and I, because anybody who puts KJV moniker on there clearly holds to the inerrancy, the trustworthiness, the preservation of God's Word. So since we're on the same page there, for those of us who accept the Bible, the 66 books of the Bible as Scripture, if there is a text, it's revelation. Let's separate revelation and doctrine, okay? There's a revelation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It's a revelation. There's no interpretation needed whatsoever. There it is right there. What you may be wanting is for particular doctrines to have a revelation. Most of them don't. Go through, various doctrines that you hold. I would assume you hold that the King James Version is God's Word for the English world today. Show me book, chapter, and verse. No, you've got a good argument. So on the pre-trib rapture, you have to build a good argument. Don't take the simplistic reductionist idea, because this would make you look dumb, and someone with a name like Chartier cannot look dumb. You don't want to take this reductionist idea to say, if it's not a book, chapter, verse, I am not holding it. People will just look and say, read a book, get an education, come on. Most of our doctrine doesn't come from book, chapter, and verse. Here's what it comes from. You have all of these verses over here that you study and analyze and make logical conclusions that end with your doctrine over here. So the pre-tribulational doctrine is an analysis of a bunch of verses. In every single doctrine, you've got to do some interpretation. So somebody ought to be able to convince you, I'm just speaking in a general you here, on their doctrine, somebody's got to convince you that their interpretation is correct. So you have to go through and say, okay, if this, then that, if that, then this, if these, then that, if all of those, then this. And sometimes it's a very not simple, but absolutely correct analysis, which the whole of that leads to this over here. So it's a little like geometry. You've got postulates, you've got theorems, you've got corollaries. You take the corollaries, they are built upon the theorems, which themselves are built upon the postulates. So I think that what a lot of people want to do is take, let's use this in the form of geometry. They want the pre-tribulational rapture, which is a theorem or a corollary. Let's call it a corollary here. It's a corollary. They want it to be a postulate. And they say, I am not accepting it unless it's a postulate. But do you only accept postulates, axiomatic? These are inherently true. There's no way you can argue them. Is that all you hold in life? No. You hold a lot of things that are theorems, that are postulates, that are theorems, that are corollaries, because, yeah, all of these axioms or postulates prove this particular theorem, and if this set of theorems is correct, and I can prove all of them is correct, then we got to go with this corollary. So, pre-tribulational rapture is just good logic. I would say far better than mid-trib, pre-wrath, post-trib, or no rapture at all. I I do have, if you're interested, on YouTube, I think this is all on Worshify. We had one or two that had a little broadcasting challenge, but maybe we've got them up now. But the series is called Prove It. Just did this a couple weeks ago. Somewhere in here, there we go. The Rapture is Pre-Tribulational, Session 4. 10 days ago. It's an hour and 12 minutes. You can go and look at my argument for that and hear some of it. I doubt for anybody who thinks real hard, and I hope that's a lot of us, I doubt in an hour and 12 minutes you can convince, because the rapture issue itself, or the timing of, let's say, eschatological issues, there are so many book, chapter, and verse that have to go there. This reminds me of, there was a guy, it's probably still out there. Can I find it? There was a guy in the Houston area that was giving a $10,000 reward for someone, I don't see it here, if somebody could prove the rapture in a book, chapter, and verse. It's like, give me a single, you gotta word this right, or you'd be out $10,000. Give me a single book, chapter, and verse, and I'll give you $10,000. Well, it's a stupid offer. It's not a bona fide offer. It's crooked. You could say $10 million. Well, let's just make it $100 million. I'll give you 100 trillion billions of dollars if you'll show me a book, chapter, and verse. But again, that's not a bona fide offer. It just shows weakness through there. Thanks. Thanks for that. Heston James Chartier. That is debonair and sophisticated. And comes from the Cornforth family. That sounds debonair and sophisticated too. And some Semitic ancestry in my family. God bless you. Thanks. I'll hit your Galatians question tomorrow. But I do want to go to Pastor Ron in Chugwater, Wyoming, before we close out today. Pastor Ron says, were you a little nervous before conducting your first funeral and graveside service? Oh, that's an understatement. Let me go on and then back up and talk about this. My goal, Pastor Ron is a new pastor, by the way. My goal, honor the deceased, comfort the family, glorify God. Amen. You got the right goal. You better be a little nervous, because you don't want to mess up. I am a firm believer that everyone deserves a good funeral. I will drop my schedule and get in the car or on a plane and go deliver a funeral of somebody I never met, because they deserve a good funeral. It's a respect of life issue. So you want to make sure you do this right. I did have the blessing of an old country undertaker. Richie Smith was his name. Monday, Texas. And here's what I would say to you, Ron. Undertakers aren't what they used to be. It's become more corporate and whatnot. But if in Chugwater, Wyoming, If you would say to the funeral director, if they're any good at all, and then maybe in the next town, I don't know. If you just go and say, hey, can I have 15 minutes? And you say, I'm a new pastor. Obviously, I'll be doing funerals. I want you to walk me through what you think is a sophisticated, noble, honorable funeral. Tell me, don't give me any names, but tell me some of the things people do wrong when they do a funeral or a graveside. Tell me some of the things they do right. These guys go to funerals 2 or 3 a week, some of them 2, 3, 4, 5 a day. They know funerals. Sit down with them and say, okay, hey, I'm a new pastor. I want to do a funeral that our community would appreciate. If the more local you can find, the better this is, because funerals do vary a lot from one location to another. But I want something that our community would be proud of. The deceased, we don't even know their name yet. They would be honored. Tell me some of the things the preachers do right, some of the things the preachers do wrong, what they should. Richie Smith, I guess he was used to young, dumb pastors, because he would come in every single time. I've told the story a number of times. He would come in and tell me how to do it. Brother Randy, that's what they called in those days, Brother Randy, we're going to go into the church for just a moment. When you go in, we'll be standing at the back door. You will go directly to the pulpit. You will stand there. You will say, please rise as the family enters. The family will enter. The family will be seated as the rest are rising, standing. After everyone has come in, we'll nod at you, and you will say, please be seated as we begin the service. We will have, they used to call it the King James service. We'll have a song, we'll have the obit, we'll have a song, we'll have the sermon. At the end, you will say a prayer. After the prayer, you will say, as the family remains seated, will the congregation please stand? At that point, the funeral director would come, they would open up the casket, and they would begin to usher the family. You will stand at the head right here. You will not shake people's hand as they go by. This is hard because people want to shake hands now. I found always hold a Bible or put your hands behind you, because you start shaking hands and it becomes this, here's the dead body right here. Oh, thank you. Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Oh, yeah, good to see you again. Becomes this hootenanny right there with the body. He would always tell you, don't shake hands right there. Because he knew you get this thing started and Katie bar the door. At the graveside, he told me, exactly, do this. He told me every single time, and I appreciate it so much. But then as a pastor, let me say, so find the logistics of it from a funeral director. I'll be happy to share if you need something. But find a way to look and sound pastoral. Here's, in the political world, sometimes we say, he or she did not seem presidential. As a pastor, there's a lot of times you do not need to be pastoral. You can be Ron. But in a funeral, figure out what pastoral means. I think it means you're going to look good and you're going to sound good. And you are going to put people at ease. Practice it. You know, have a funeral for a bird or something to practice it. I am out of time. I have to do I've thought about writing a little brochure for families especially. Here's what you want your funeral to be, because I've been to enough funerals. I honestly don't know how many. 2,500 maybe? I have been to the funerals. Writing a little pamphlet for the family, because the family now messes. It used to be the church was in charge of the funeral. Now it's the family in charge of the funeral, but the family doesn't know how to be in charge of a funeral. Now the church doesn't know how to be in charge of a funeral because they haven't done funerals. And the funeral directors, as I mentioned, it's this corporate deal of cha-ching, bury, cha-ching, bury. There's not that ministry of service that there used to be in funeral homes, other than a few private funeral homes. So really, it's harder to do right now. Okay, sorry, a lot of comment on there that I wasn't able to get to. And more questions, we'll get there. Thank you. I see, let's see, an anonymous question. Several. Bad Penny is back. Charlie B in Tennessee is back. Harvey, good to see you. Some of these questions I have got to get to. Richard, Jay. Oh, that Jay's just a comment. Thanks, Jay. Mr. Chartier. All that. Okay, thanks everybody for spending time with us. Wish we had 3 hours a day. Then I would become like those other programs, right? God bless you. And praying for each of you. I hope you are having a wonderful day. If you need a place for school, jndarbyacademy.org. Thank you, each one, for being here. Tonight, we do have the Bible study. Let's call it 10 after 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Hope to see you there. God bless you. Take care.